Hello, welcome to the Midnight Hymn podcast, where we talk about Virgin Black songs. I'm Josh Foreman, and with me is Ryan. Introduce yourself.
Hey, Ryan. Some dude from Texas.
Some dude from Texas. And then we've got someone else. Who's this, Eric?
I'm Eric Soto, former Navy broadcaster and musician, as well as working in the field of audio and music.
But today we've got incredibly gorgeous, beautiful song from Virgin Black's album, Elegant. Nope. Yes, Elegant and Dying. Wow. I'm off today. We're recording on an evening. Usually we do, middays. So you'll have to forgive my brain fry. Friday afternoon. So the song is called Velvet Tongue. And let's just dive into it, listen to it, and then we'll start yammering about it, shall we?
Let's do it.
Awesome.
All right. Here we go.
A thousand tears, a thousand eyes. My friends and I, we cry. Religion has raped us. Forever we rehearse the song that snips our throats to blood. We bear our souls in transparency, but our velvet tongues will never please their ears. But are you holding on? I am holding on.
And there it is. 8 minutes of some of the most beautiful thing I've ever heard.
Song goes a lot quicker than 8 minutes, or the way that it feels. I feel like.
It's funny. I think like this is our third episode, and I think literally every song we've done has been 8 minutes long. I think it's 7 or 8.
Yeah. They're not known for short songs, that's for
We
sure.
got a few, but yeah, not many. To start us out, let's talk about the title. What does Velvet Tongue mean? Break that down.
Well, I did some internet sleuthing, and believe it or not, there's a definition on Urban Dictionary, so take it or leave it.
Oh boy.
But I think it's appropriate. The definition is this: the ability to convince someone with elegance and grace instead of traditional persuasion.
Oh, that was not nearly as dirty as I was hoping or expecting.
Well, there are other, shall we say, alternatives that may not be for the faint of heart.
Yes, okay.
Yeah.
No, the Virgin Black is far too classy to delve into any of those. But that's definitely the impression I have. Is like, what is the tongue being used for? Like, according to the context of this, we're communicating. We're trying to communicate something. We're paying the consequences of communicating something. And something about the way we are communicating is, in some cases, falling on deaf ears. In some cases, causing active pain, generally to ourselves, it seems like.
Yeah, no, for sure. Eric, what are your thoughts as you kind of explore the totality of the song?
Yeah, I was trying to think more about that at work. I mean, I think, there's definitely a key when it says that our velvet tongues will never please their ears, and then later on it's talking about priests. I was thinking it kind of in context of that, like almost like people that have a more gentle and more open-minded approach to spirituality rather than like harsh legalism and like the fire and brimstone. That was kind of how I interpreted it, like because the whole theme of the song, I originally thought it was kind of about like literally physical abuse in religion and religious organizations, which I mean is obviously really dark, and it could tie into that, but it could be a wider context of just kind of dead religion, like having that disconnect with maybe your the religion you're in, disconnect with the priest, disconnect with others in that religion, and them kind of missing the spirit or like the heart of what it really means to be like a spiritual or just a good person in general. It's kind of where my head was at.
Yeah, VB uses the word priests in a lot of their songs. So I personally sort of associate the word priest as an umbrella term for religious zealotry, people that are sort of known for their certitude, and most importantly, there's a tendency to other people, to put them outside of a fence, and the diameter of that fence, is pretty small. And so I definitely get the sense that there's an element of religious trauma in this song. Certainly the use of the word rape, religion has raped us. I don't want to keep rambling, but yeah, priests in my mind are frankly religious abusers or people that use shame, guilt, and trying to control.
Yeah, one of the things that jumps out to me is so heaven hears nothing as the priests are wailing, and that immediately brings to mind the story of oh God, I'm going to forget which prophet this is. Is it Elijah or Elisha? One of those two. Who's it's the competition between the prophet of Yahweh and the prophet of Baal, and so they cut up steak, essentially cow, put it on an altar, and then the priests of Baal are supposed to get their god to burn it up. And so they're screaming and cutting themselves and dancing and prostrating themselves, and heaven hears nothing. And I think turning that back around on people whose holy book has this story in it and saying, look, you're doing that. Like, to me, that's an incredibly powerful sort of judo spiritual maneuver there.
When Ryan said religious trauma, I think that's kind of like a good summary of the entire song. Kind of like getting through that very dark thing that can happen in organized religion, particularly, and how you relate to others.
Yeah, it's interesting. You said I don't remember your exact words, but something around that's like the main theme in the whole song. And I would say that's one side of a coin. The other side of the coin is perseverance and sort of holding on, the theme of hope. So Virgin Black's known thematically, and in fact, they advertise themselves as their primary function, mission, theme is about hope and tragedy. So the very name Virgin Black is, sort of purity and human darkness, two sides of the same coin. So I see that woven into this song. And it's really important to understand that this entire album, I think, is their most complex, and I use the word existential, not to, get into philosophy and Jean-Paul Sartre and others, but it is an experience, a very epistemic, crushing experience where you're sort of in a mortar and pestle, and this solid, think of a cube, just gets grinded into dust, and then only to be reassembled. But the version that is reassembled it's obtained something. And it's the whole question of essence versus existence. And I find the entire album is fascinating. And to close on this thought, sorry to hog the conversation, this song is paired. This particular album is, in one sense, it's one single song, but there's segments. And in this case, you have Velvet Tongue and The Kiss of God's Mouth, which together form essentially a stream, one unified song, which one might consider phase one of the album, Velvet Tongue and The Kiss of God's Mouth. And the song at the very end has this guitar, and it transitions immediately into and The Kiss of God's Mouth. So, there's no pause where it's skipping tracks or anything like that. I'll stop.
No, that's a really good point, and we should definitely do that song next. I feel like because they are such part and parcel, and they reflect meaning off of each other that way. So,
on this same point, it's important to look at the song that precedes it, and in this case, we have the introductory song, which has it's almost all instrumental. It's called "Adorned in Ashes," and note the word ashes. Ashes, think of the mortar and pestle. I mean, in this case, ashes are created through, fire. I just find it interesting that it starts with Adorned in Ashes, moves to Velvet Tongue, and then transitions to And the Kiss of God's Mouth. I think all three of them form a unified sort of body of work for phase one.
Yeah, for sure. I'll throw out a couple little points, just notes that I made as I've listened through several times. I'm curious if Eric knows what the guitar harmony, that kind of, maybe the word is just harmony and it's just the way it's done, but specifically at minute 130,
Yeah, I think that is it's just kind of an example of dissonance, because like the first chord is just kind of like a regular minor chord, and then it kind of like shifts to like a more dissonant chord, which you can kind of just think of kind of like a normal chord, but like one of the notes is just kind of shift. Like if you're playing a regular chord on guitar and you're like shifting your finger like up and down like one fret, like creating kind of that, it kind of just creates more tension, which is, I think, really cool. The song is in is it F minor, which is one of my favorite keys to work with. And I pulled something off of ledgernote.com, and it describes the mood of it as deepest depression, lament over death and loss, and like harrowing, melancholic feeling. Which I'd say kind of describes that song. So
Wow. Yeah. Sounds like the right tool for the job.
yeah.
Yeah.
Another like moment that always stands out to me in this song is right around the 7-minute mark, where I think it's a key shift, but it is one of those that like consistently gives me the music shivers, if you know what I mean. Like where you're just like, so I don't know what that thing is called, but man, it moves me physically.
Yeah, I think it's an example of modulation, which is just kind of shifting to another key, which in this case, I think it's, my guess is it's moving to the relative minor. So you could think of it just like moving down like three steps on a piano, essentially. So you still kind of have some of the same or similar chords to work with, but it kind of shifts the mood. The first song on my album, the last album that I made, that's what happens. I shift it.
You should shout it out here
end.
real quick so I can put it in the link. What's your album called?
Yeah, for sure. It's The Eighth Sphere, and the album title is Kaizen.
Cool. Link in the description. So what's interesting to me, as someone who, I write novels, I also make art and video games and all these things. And something that I consistently see in Virgin Black that I think they do expertly is they have a sense of like narrative progression, whether there is like literal narrative or not, or even thematic progression. And they pair that, the music, the way the vocals are delivered, and the lyrics all like so well. So I think the reason that Key Shift hits me so hard is because they are like firing on all cylinders right there. It's like they built up this tension throughout, and then it's like a release at that point.
Yeah, it really gives me like a feeling of like redemption, and like Ryan was talking about earlier, like a sense of hope, like, you're trying to move to that next phase of, I kind of think of the feeling like you're weeping like intensely, and then you kind of have like that once it's all done, you kind of have that bright moment of like, okay, I released that. Now my brain can actually think about how I'm going to move forward and what I'm going to do with this, rather than, just staying in that despair, but there's kind of that neurological feeling of having that tension released.
Cool. Ryan, do you have any moments you want to point out?
Well, it's not like I like this line, but the line "religion, has raped us." We don't like to think about the rape, but if you really deconstruct that word, and I mentioned this in Museum of Iscariot in our first episode, I think it's important to think about it as violate, control, and objectify. And I think it's, when you think of it in those terms, it's hard to dispute, given the civilization and the history of religion, to dismiss those three words. So that one sticks out, but also the fact that it's spoken. It's not sung. You don't sing, religion has raped us. At the very beginning of the song, it's just, it's almost like he's just talking in a morose or sort of interrogating way. So I thought that was interesting. So I'll pause on that line. There's some other lines that really stand out to me, but that one in the first verse kind of hits me, Yeah,
it's definitely one of the harder hitting lines of that song. And you can interpret it different ways. I thought of it like, just kind of like along the lines of what you were saying, but extracting just like all the life out of you, which is what very controlling religious settings can do. Just pulling everything out of you to the point that it's not actually even helping your spiritual or your personal journey anymore. It's just kind of become this
Bondage.
flatline thing. Yeah, a bondage. Yeah.
I'm curious what you guys think of the line, forever we rehearse the song that stripped our throats to blood. I'm not fully, my mind has not constructed meaning from my experience with respect to that line. I suspect there's a lot of symbolism in there, like what does blood represent and what does the song represent? I'm curious, do you guys have any insights on that one? I've searched, and I don't know that I've found anything that profound. How do you guys internalize that line?
I think of it like as like ritual coming to a point where it doesn't serve you anymore. Because you're like you're singing psalms in a religious setting, but then like to the point that like, oh, it's hurting you. You know what I mean? Like there's some aspect of going through the motions of religion that is no longer helping you in any way. It's just kind of becoming a detriment, and then
it's like
how
it's
long
like
it
the
takes you to
clanging
realize
cymbals that Jesus preached against, right? Like there's certain kinds of prayers, just repeating the prayers or whatever, and you're just making noise, man.
Yeah. Alongside the lyric of talking about the priest wailing,
Mm-hmm.
there's just a total disconnect from what it was first supposed to be about, or what they claim that it's about.
I think there's
happens.
There's a thematic question here. Like, is this line this first 4 lines here? Forever we rehearse the song that strips our throats to blood. We bare our souls in transparency, but our velvet tongues will never please their ears. So those first 2 about like, are those connected, or is that a progression? Like, forever we rehearse the song that strips our throat to blood. Is that something that happened in the past and now we're doing something else? Or is that part of the velvet tongues that will never please their ears? I don't know how to take that. Like, if you take it as like you were insinuating, Eric, like this is what essentially dead repetitive religion does to you. Like, it just wears you down to your parts and accomplishes essentially all it does is damage you over time. Or is it part of this velvet tongues thing? And is the velvet tongues thing, is that supposed to be an expression of the artist saying, here's my message. I'm saying it in a way that is velvety, however you're going to take that, whether it's beautiful, articulate, gentle. You could take it lots of different ways. So I don't know. It's full of ambiguities, and reading it those 2 different ways can change a lot.
Yeah, what's interesting is Virgin Black is one of the few bands, certainly if you go back to the 90s and early 2000s, I don't have omniscience with respect to the whole, music scene, or what some may call the Christian music scene. But they're the only band that I know of that literally has songs about religious abuse, and or spiritual abuse. I mean, the song from their trance EP, Whispers of Dead Sisters, is absolutely potent. We need to do that song. It's got some incredible transitions. It's almost like 3 songs in one. But they have a line where the priests are pointing their finger, they've made me your betrayer. And again, the use of priests in that song, sort of pointing at somebody and declaring them a betrayer of God, only to be followed up on that song with "I crave your presence." It's just interesting. So going back to Velvet Tongue, I can't sort of move away from my conviction that it's a crushing. It's the first instance of an experience that is deeply wounding. And as you progress through the album, the scattering of oneself. That's another theme. Virgin Black has in their requiems, they have literally songs or that talk about scattering and gathering of ourselves. And it's almost like when I think of my own life, I think of iterations or versions of me in the past, you know, my 20-year-old self, my 5-year-old self, my 30-year-old self. And each one of those iterations is demarked or, you know, by some sort of crisis that disassembles me in his adversity. And then I get reassembled into some temporary whole version only to go through the process again, which goes back to my original point of, you know, existence preceding essence, only to have essence preceding existence. So we often think of those as either ors, one's true and one's false, but I see it as a both and. I'll stop there.
That's deep. That's a lot. I imagine that's a topic you could dive deeply into.
Makes me think a lot of the whole myth of the phoenix and like kind of like dying to be born again, like a different way.
At some point, this song kind of switches to, you know, being crushed, being abused, speaking out, not being heard, and then we transition to this idea, but we're holding on. So, and I think that's key to understanding both, you know, the whole oeuvre of Virgin Black and this song in particular. Like, what is being held on to here? Like, how is that purposely vague so that it can apply to many people, right? Or is it very specific to the artist? Is it specific to the song?
I mean, the first thing I thought of was like, you know, your sense of self, your sense of being a spiritual person, you know, because you can go through that whole dark night of the soul, you know, going through religious trauma and completely lose any interest in spirituality, any interest in, I don't know, philosophy in general. Like, you can kind of just lose yourself entirely, but to still trying to hold on to something that works for you in terms of spirituality. That's kind of how I interpret it, because you can just be beaten about the brow, and I think of like being like, you know, lost at sea almost, and you can kind of just let yourself go, or you can try and hang on to the debris of whatever's left of the ship or whatever's left of your I don't know. I don't like using the word faith anymore because it's so ambiguous, but if that works for you, you know, holding on to your essence. Faith. Yeah, your essence.
Yeah. I see holding on is holding on to hope. And I see it as like a thin thread. If you think of the intonation by which that line is sung, it's like there's this barely-ness to it, like I'm barely holding on. Obviously, I inserted that word. It's just the way it's sung. It's not like a firm grip onto handles and you're getting whipped in the back in this sort of crucifixion-like imagery of the priest. But to me, it's like I'm grabbing like a fishing line. It's so thin, a string, and I'm barely holding on. That's how I internalize it. I don't know that that's, you know, right, but that's just my experience of the song.
Yeah, certainly, you know, when you get to, is it the last song? Yes, Our Wings Are Burning, the last song on the album, you know, my favorite line ever, you know, all is lost but hope. And that's it sums up my spiritual journey. Like, like literally, I took everything that used to be in the bucket of faith and I moved it over to the bucket of hope. Like, yeah, I don't have faith. Sorry. But man, I have lots of hopes for humanity, for a reason for existence, you know, for something imbued by someone somewhere. I don't know. I just hope. And I live according to those hopes. Right. And that's, so yeah, I get a lot of those positive chills from this song as it relates to me. Like, I am holding on, though I don't have all the like doctrines. I can't sign on the dotted line on all these doctrines that I used to. Look at my face. Look at my eyes. Do you see God? Like, and if my life is not reflecting God, then yeah, that's bad to me. I want to live as Christ, as a an example of how to love and to be a neighbor and all those things. You know what I mean? So those are my hopes, and those are what I cling to as the vestiges of what's left behind after the priest wailing, etc.
It's a great way of putting it. I really love that line. Look at God in my eyes. Especially because it comes at a point in the song that's just so, it's probably the heaviest part of the song, but also just the most, climactic. But there's so many times, or at least in the evangelical faith I come from, where God is just kind of projected out there somewhere, right? Like it's something separate from yourself. And, here's this person saying, just begging, look at God in my eyes, like, see the divinity that's actually within all of us, I would argue. And, that changes how you treat people entirely. There was a quote from this guy named Suave Vivekananda. I think that's how you say his name. But it came to mind when I read that lyric, and it goes, where can we go to find God if we cannot see him in our own hearts and in every living being? So that definitely relates to me for religious trauma and like, how people are treated in organized religion sometimes, and just failing to see how we're all connected to whatever we define God, or whether one believes in God or not, like how we're all kind of connected to that essence or source, if you will.
Yeah, Eric, I think this is the most potent part of the song. You've got the violence or the experience of rejection. You've got the theme of holding on. But this line, and it's not even a line. If you really back up, it starts off with, there's a repetition to it that I think enhances or amplifies the potency of what's being conveyed here. It starts with, look at me, look at my, and then look at my face. Look at God in my eyes. And then it ends with a shriek of, look at my life. I really like that. And it's interesting because on Twitter, I follow somebody named Billie is Writing. That's Billie. And she's a really beautiful person on the inside and the outside. And every morning she posts a picture of herself. And her eyes are always present and open, and every morning that's one of my routines is it almost always comes up on my feed, and I always experience this line right here, look at God in my eyes. And every time I see this person, I really experience this line, and it's just powerful. And at the end of the album of Our Wings Are Burning, Josh, you mentioned it, there's a similar line. It's, look at my face. Do you see God? And very similar along these lines.
Yeah.
And then the drumville.
Yeah.
So good.
I love how they do their songwriting. It's so good in conveying emotion and just progression, which is probably why they write so many long songs. They're like, we can't just condense this, we can't tell the story properly if we condense this in too short of a song length.
Yeah, I think something that's standing out to me, just from this conversation is, that the last line of the song is, we stand. And as we're talking about, if you're challenging someone, if you're asking someone to look at you sincerely, as a person, take the time, look at me, look in my eyes. You know, that is an invitation to intimacy, and it's vulnerability, and to then stand and say, go ahead and judge me, you know, look at God in my eyes. In a sense, that's taking the onus off of the kind of the abstract doctrines of, you know, how people in general should live their lives, et cetera, et cetera. It's saying, I'm standing here, you know, if what you see is not something that resonates with you, why should I expect you to follow any of these doctrines that I have, whether that's philosophy or politics or religion or whatever, right? It's like, yeah, I am an example of you know, living my belief system. Does it have value to you? I think that's just a powerful reversal of the way many people put things, which is like, here's the truth out here, you know, it's in this holy book, or it's in the Constitution, or whatever it may be, you know, Jean-Paul Sartre said this, so it must be true. You know, it's instead saying, here I am living this life. What do you think?
Yeah, you have to, you know, even if you have disagreements with someone, like there has to be some way to connect with, you know, the humanness of another person. And I mean, that's why I was saying earlier, you know, thinking of divinity being innate in all of us, because if you can't start from a place of mutual respect and earnestly trying to understand others, then, you know, it's
or seeing the other as sacred, right? Like, you need to see other people as sacred in some sense, you know.
Totally. Like, I actually advertise my pronouns on Twitter. Josh, you and I interact a bit. I have it, thou as my pronouns. And that's very intentional, because you're either going to see me as an it or a thou. And thou is exactly what we're talking about. You're going to see me as a human with some form of divinity. If you see my immutable characteristics, you know, white, cis, hetero, that's fine, but that technically isn't it. And I'm being templatized or objectified. And so at the end of the day, in my view, there's really only two pronouns, it or thou. It really comes down to how you choose to see me. And I agree completely with seeing, you know, shared humanity in each other and trying to connect at that level rather than, you know, an ideological level, which just results in tribalism.
Yeah, agreed. I think that's a pretty good note to end it on, with our goal of trying to keep these under an hour. I don't know if we achieved that. We'll see after editing. But is there any final words? Did we miss anything important you want to touch on as a last statement?
I think I'm good, other than, you know, give the album a listen. It's got distorted guitars, so some people, it's just not their cup of tea musically. But you owe it to yourself to experience the album, you know, experientially with the lyrics. I mean, they're just really deep and I think profound lyrics. I think it's one of their best pieces of work.
Yeah, I often hold this up and say this is the greatest artifact that humans have ever made. So
it's definitely my favorite album of theirs, and, you know, the intro of this one is really pulls you in with the I think it's the hang drum instrument. It's just very dark and atmospheric right from the get-go. So
yeah, I love that sound too. Yeah.
Josh, I know Eric will eventually get to Our Wings is Burning. It's arguably their most popular song. If, you know, you're just not sold on the guitars and the style of metal or doom, you owe it to yourself to at least watch that video, because that's the one song that they actually have a video for outside of Walk Without Limbs. But the Our Wings Are Burning video is, man, it's really powerful, and it's a condensed version of the song, so, you know, it's only like 4 minutes.
We'll post a link below.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, I think we'll end it there, and like I intimated, I believe we're going to do the Kiss of God's Mouth next. We just kind of gotta. So,
yep.
We'll see you guys for that next time.
Appreciate it. Awesome. Peace out.
All right.
Thanks for chatting. See you guys.
Bye, everyone.